The sound of Nina's laughter drifting through our kitchen window at 11:30 on a Tuesday night wasn't unusual anymore. What made my wrench slip and bark my knuckles against the truck's engine block was what she said next. "He's so basic, like a human pothole that never gets fixed." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I froze under the hood of my '98 Ford, grease coating my hands, listening to my wife of 18 years describe me to whoever was on the other end of that phone call. The kitchen light cast her silhouette against the curtains, wine glass in one hand, phone pressed to her ear with the other. "Grant thinks changing oil makes him some kind of blue-collar hero," she continued, her voice carrying that particular brand of cruelty she'd perfected over the past 6 months. "Meanwhile, some of us are actually building careers that matter." If I'm a pothole, I thought, wiping my hands on an old rag, I hope I swallow your next Uber whole. I'd been fixing things my entire adult life. Bridges, roads, water systems, the infrastructure that kept our mid-sized New England city running. As a civil engineer, I solved problems that actually mattered, problems that affected real people's daily lives. But according to Nina, my work was just glorified construction, nothing compared to her job as lifestyle editor at Metropolitan Living magazine. "No, he doesn't suspect anything," Nina said, lowering her voice. "He's too wrapped up in his little projects to notice what's right in front of him." My stomach dropped like a failed foundation. The casual way she said it, the practiced ease. This wasn't a new conversation. I set down my tools and moved closer to the window, staying in the shadows of our 2-car garage. "Theo, you're being paranoid," she laughed. "Grant barely notices when I'm gone for work trips, let alone who I'm with." Theodore Marten, the magazine's art director. I'd met him twice at company parties. Soft hands, expensive cologne. The kind of guy who pronounced croissant with a French accent, even though he grew up in suburban Connecticut. Nina had mentioned him more frequently lately, always in the context of work projects and creative collaborations. "The Riverside Hotel was perfect last weekend," Nina continued. "Grant thought I was at that conference in Hartford." There it was. The conference I'd helped her prepare for, the one where she was supposedly networking with other lifestyle publications. I'd even driven her to the train station, kissed her goodbye, told her to give it her best. Instead, she'd been knocking boots with Theodore. I stood there in my own driveway, in front of the house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 15 years, listening to my wife plan her next rendezvous with her lover. The suburban neighborhood around us was picture perfect. Manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, the kind of place where people minded their own business and kept their dirty laundry behind closed doors. "He'll never leave his routine long enough to catch us," Nina said. "Every Tuesday, truck maintenance. Every Thursday, that disgusting gym. Every weekend, some home improvement project. He's like a robot programmed for mediocrity." The gym wasn't disgusting. It was the one place where I could think clearly, where the rhythm of hitting heavy bags helped me work through engineering problems. My friend Mitch owned it, an ex-cop who'd turned his passion for boxing into a business after taking early retirement. The gym was honest, straightforward. You hit things, they hit back, and everybody understood the rules. Unlike my marriage, apparently. "I have to go," Nina said. "He's probably done playing mechanic by now." The kitchen light went out, and I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I stayed in the garage for another 20 minutes, pretending to organize tools while my mind raced through the implications. 18 years of marriage, a 16-year-old daughter, a shared life that I'd thought was solid despite our recent rough patches. All of it built on a foundation that was apparently crumbling while I wasn't looking. When I finally went inside, Nina was already in bed, her back turned to my side of the room. She'd left her phone charging on the nightstand, face down like always now. 6 months ago, she used to leave it face up, never caring if I saw her messages or calls. The change had been gradual enough that I dismissed it as a new habit, not a sign of deception. I lay awake until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling and listening to her breathe. Every shared memory felt contaminated now. Recent dinners where she'd seemed distracted, weekend trips she'd canceled at the last minute, the new clothes and jewelry that had appeared without explanation. "Work bonus," she'd said about the diamond earrings. "The magazine's doing really well this quarter." Now I wondered if Theo had picked them out. The next morning, Nina was already gone when I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight. Working late on the summer issue." I stared at the note, written in her familiar handwriting, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not just anger or hurt, but something more calculating. I'd spent my career identifying structural weaknesses, finding the stress points that could bring down entire systems if left unchecked. My marriage had stress fractures, and it was time to do a proper inspection. I called in sick to work, something I'd done maybe 5 times in the past decade, and spent the day going through our shared spaces with new eyes. Nina had always been neat to the point of obsession, but now I noticed the gaps. Credit card statements that used to arrive by mail had been switched to electronic delivery. Her laptop, which used to sit open on the kitchen counter, now disappeared into her purse every morning. In her closet, I found clothes I'd never seen her wear around me, a red dress with the tags still on, size 6 instead of her usual 8. She'd been working out more lately, claiming stress from work, but maybe she'd been getting in shape for someone else. The hotel receipt was tucked inside a coat pocket, folded small and forgotten. The Riverside Hotel, just like she'd mentioned on the phone. But the dates were wrong. This was from 3 weeks ago, not last weekend, which meant the Hartford conference story was just one lie among many. I sat on our bed, holding the receipt, and tried to remember the last time Nina and I had been truly happy together. Not just going through the motions, but genuinely enjoying each other's company. It had been months, maybe longer. We'd become roommates, sharing space and expenses, but not much else. But I'd been trying to fix it, suggesting date nights and weekend getaways, thinking we just needed to reconnect. Meanwhile, she'd been reconnecting with Theodore. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email. A friend." The email contained 3 photographs, taken with a telephoto lens from across the street. Nina and Theodore at a sidewalk cafe, his hand covering hers across a small table. Nina laughing at something he'd said, her face bright with the kind of joy I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Theodore leaning in to kiss her cheek, his hand resting on her lower back in a gesture that spoke of familiarity and possession. They looked like a couple, a happy couple. I forwarded the photos to my personal email and deleted the original message. Whoever had sent them had done me a favor, but I wasn't ready to think about why someone else might want me to know about Nina's affair. One crisis at a time. The rest of the day passed in a blur of research and planning. I opened new bank accounts, started documenting our shared assets, and made copies of important documents. If this marriage was going to collapse, I wanted to be prepared for the aftermath. When Nina came home that evening, she was practically glowing. "How was your day?" she asked, the same question she'd asked every night for years. "Productive," I said. "How was the meeting?" "Oh, you know how it is. Lots of creative energy, new ideas for the summer issue." She poured herself a glass of wine, her 3rd this week that I'd noticed. Theo had some really innovative concepts for the lifestyle spreads. I bet he did. She didn't catch the edge in my voice, too caught up in her own deception to notice mine. We ate dinner in relative silence, the same routine we'd fallen into over the past few months. She scrolled through her phone between bites, occasionally showing me pictures from work events or funny memes, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. After dinner, I went out to the garage and started working on the truck again. But really I was thinking. Planning. Nina wanted to play games with our marriage? Fine. but she'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd built my career on understanding how things worked, how they could be improved, and when necessary, how they could be torn down safely and efficiently. My marriage was just another structure that needed evaluation. And if the foundation was rotten, well, sometimes the only solution was controlled demolition. The anonymous emailer struck again 3 days later. This time, it was a forwarded receipt from Theodore's credit card. Dinner for two at Chez Laurent, the French place downtown that Nina had been wanting to try for months. According to the timestamp, they'd been there last Tuesday while I was working late on the Morrison Bridge project. I'd come home that night to find Nina already asleep, claiming a headache. Apparently Theodore's company had been the cure. The receipt came with a note. Thought you should know. AC. Angela Chen, my colleague at the engineering firm. We'd worked together on several projects over the past 2 years, and she'd always been professional, competent, and discreet. I wondered what had motivated her to become my anonymous informant, but I was grateful for the intelligence. I was starting to understand the scope of Nina's deception. This wasn't a recent development or a moment of weakness. It was a sustained campaign of lies that had been going on for months. Every work event and late meeting took on new meaning when viewed through the lens of infidelity. Thursday evening, I drove to Mitch's gym instead of my usual routine. The place was a converted warehouse in the industrial part of town, all exposed brick and steel beams. No fancy mirrors or chrome equipment, just heavy bags, speed bags, and a boxing ring where Mitch taught kids from the neighborhood how to channel their aggression into something productive. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," Mitch said when I walked in. He was in his mid-40s like me, but 20 pounds heavier and built like the linebacker he'd been in college. His shaved head was scarred from his police days, and his hands were permanently swollen from years of hitting things. "Worse," I said, wrapping my hands. "Someone stole my wife." Mitch stopped what he was doing and looked at me seriously. "You want to talk about it, or you want to hit something?" "Both." I spent the next hour alternating between the heavy bag and telling Mitch about Nina's affair. He listened without judgment, occasionally offering practical advice from his years as a cop. "Document everything," he said. "Photos, receipts, text messages if you can get them, and don't confront her until you have a complete picture. People do stupid things when they're cornered." "I'm not looking to destroy her," I said, throwing a combination that made the bag swing. "I just want to understand what I'm dealing with." "Bullshit," Mitch said. "You want revenge. Nothing wrong with that, as long as you're smart about it." He was right, of course. The hurt was there, but underneath it was something colder and more calculating. Nina had made me look like a fool, and she was enjoying it. The casual way she'd dismissed me on that phone call, the confidence that I'd never figure it out. That stung worse than the actual betrayal. "What do you know about Theodore Marten?" I asked. Mitch grinned. "The art director? Pretty boy with the expensive car and the trust fund?" "You know him?" "His gym membership here lasted about 3 weeks. Complained about the lack of amenities and the aggressive atmosphere. Word around town is that he's been climbing the ladder at the magazine by being very friendly with the female staff." "How friendly?" "Let's just say your wife isn't his first workplace romance, but she might be his most ambitious target." That was an interesting angle I hadn't considered. Maybe Nina wasn't just cheating. Maybe she was being played by someone with more experience in office politics and extramarital affairs. "You want my advice?" Mitch said. "Don't just gather evidence. Gather leverage." Friday morning, I decided to do some field reconnaissance. I called in another sick day and positioned myself at a coffee shop across the street from Nina's office building. Metropolitan Living occupied the top 3 floors of a renovated downtown building, all glass walls and open concept design that was supposed to encourage creativity and collaboration. At 11:47 a.m., Nina and Theodore emerged from the building together. They walked close but not touching, maintaining professional distance until they reached his car, a silver BMW that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Once they were inside, the professional facade dropped. Theodore's hand went to Nina's knee, and she leaned over to kiss him before he started the engine. They drove to the Riverside Hotel, the same place from the receipt I'd found. I parked across the street and watched them enter through the lobby, Theodore's hand on Nina's lower back in a gesture of possession that made my jaw clench. They emerged 2 hours later, looking satisfied and slightly disheveled. Nina checked her appearance in the car's side mirror, fixing her lipstick and smoothing her hair. Theodore said something that made her laugh, and she swatted his arm playfully. I followed them back to the office building, where they separated in the parking garage. Nina went in first, Theodore following 5 minutes later. Professional distance maintained, alibis intact. That evening, Nina came home in a good mood. "How was your day?" I asked, the question loaded with new meaning. "Busy," she said, pouring her usual glass of wine. Theo and I had a working lunch to discuss the summer layouts. Very productive. I'm sure it was. She started talking about magazine business, circulation numbers, advertising revenue, creative direction for upcoming issues. I nodded and made appropriate responses while studying her face. She was a good liar. I had to give her credit. If I hadn't seen the hotel visit myself, I might have believed the enthusiasm in her voice was purely professional. "Oh, I forgot to mention," she said casually. "I'll be working late next week. We're finalizing the summer issue, and there's a lot of coordination between editorial and art direction. More working lunches? Probably. You know how these creative collaborations can be." I knew exactly how they could be. That weekend, our daughter Emma came home from a sleepover at her friend's house. At 16, she was becoming more like Nina every day. Image-conscious, socially aware, and increasingly dismissive of anything she considered beneath her standards. "Dad, when are you going to get a real car?" she asked, looking at my truck with obvious embarrassment. "It's so embarrassing when you pick me up from school." "The truck runs fine," I said. "It gets me where I need to go. But it's so old and gross. Mom's car is at least presentable." Nina had leased a new Lexus 6 months ago, claiming she needed something more professional for client meetings. Now I wondered if impressing Theodore had been part of the motivation. "Maybe when you get your license, you can buy your own car," I suggested. Emma rolled her eyes. "God, Dad, you're so practical about everything. Don't you want nice things?" "I have nice things. I have a family, a house, a job I'm good at." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." She flounced upstairs to her room, leaving me to wonder when my own daughter had started seeing me as a disappointment. Had Nina been poisoning that relationship too, or was this just normal teenage disdain for the practical parent? Sunday dinner was a tense affair. Nina picked at her food while scrolling through her phone. Emma complained about everything from the seasoning to the table settings, and I sat there feeling like a stranger in my own house. "I saw the Hendersons got a new pool," Nina said, not looking up from her phone. "It must be nice to have that kind of disposable income." The Hendersons lived 3 houses down, and both worked in finance. Their combined income was probably double ours, but we'd never struggled financially. We had savings, investments, and equity in the house. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. "We could put in a pool if you really wanted one," I said. Nina laughed, but not in a good way. "With what money? Your salary barely covers the mortgage and Emma's school expenses. My salary covers plenty, and your income isn't exactly insignificant. My income goes to maintaining a certain standard of living. Someone has to care about how we present ourselves." Emma nodded in agreement. "Dad, you have to admit, we're not exactly the most exciting family in the neighborhood." I looked at my wife and daughter, united in their dissatisfaction with our life, and felt something shift inside me. I'd been thinking of Nina's affair as a betrayal of our marriage, but maybe it was just the symptom of a larger problem. Maybe they'd both outgrown me, or thought they had. "You're right," I said. "I'm not very exciting. I just build bridges and fix roads and pay for the house you live in and the cars you drive. Very boring stuff." "That's not what we meant," Nina said, but her tone suggested it was exactly what she meant. "No, I get it. I'm the practical one, the reliable one, the one who handles all the boring details while you two focus on more important things like image and social status." "Dad, don't be dramatic," Emma said. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being honest. You want excitement? Fine. Let's see how exciting things get." I stood up from the table, leaving my half-eaten dinner behind. As I walked toward the garage, I heard Nina and Emma exchange glances. "What's gotten into him?" Emma asked. "Midlife crisis," Nina replied. "He'll get over it." "No," I thought, grabbing my keys. "I really won't." I drove to Mitch's gym and spent 2 hours hitting the heavy bag until my hands were raw and my shirt was soaked with sweat. When I finally stopped, Mitch was sitting on a bench nearby, watching me with the patient expression of someone who'd seen plenty of men work through their demons. "Feel better?" he asked. "Getting there." "Good. Because I did some research on your boy Theodore, and I think you're going to find it very interesting." Mitch's research proved that Theodore Marten was even worse than I'd imagined. Not only was he a serial workplace predator, but he'd been using his relationships with female colleagues to advance his career and undermine his competition. 3 different women in the past 5 years, Mitch explained, handing me a folder of printed information. All of them in positions that could help him professionally. 2 of them were married. The first was Sarah Mitchell, a marketing coordinator who'd been fired after their affair became public knowledge. Theodore had emerged from that scandal with a promotion to senior art director. The second was Jennifer Walsh, an advertising executive whose husband had divorced her when he discovered the relationship. Theodore had leveraged Jennifer's client connections to land several major accounts for the magazine. "And now he's working on your wife," Mitch continued, "who happens to be the lifestyle editor with significant influence over the magazine's direction and budget." I studied the photographs and documents Angela had helped Mitch compile. Theodore wasn't just having an affair with Nina, he was positioning himself for another career advancement, probably aiming for the creative director position that would open up when the current director retired next year. "He's using her," I said, "and she's letting him. Question is, does she know she's being played, or is she a willing participant?" That was the question that had been bothering me for days. Was Nina a victim of Theodore's manipulation, or was she an active collaborator in destroying our marriage for the sake of her career and social ambitions? The answer came Monday morning when Angela forwarded me another email. This one was from Nina's work account to Theodore, sent the previous Friday while I was having my revelation about being the boring, practical husband. "Grant's getting suspicious, but I don't think he has any real evidence. He's too straightforward to be good at detective work. We just need to be more careful about timing and locations. The riverside is too close to his usual routes." So much for being the victim. Nina was an active participant, and she was confident enough in my supposed stupidity to discuss strategy with her lover via work email. The email continued, "I've been setting up the narrative at home, emphasizing how different we are, how he doesn't understand my professional needs. Emma's already on board with the idea that he's holding us back. When I finally file for divorce, it'll look like the natural conclusion of an incompatible marriage." My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. This wasn't just an affair. It was a coordinated campaign to justify destroying our marriage while making me look like the problem. Nina had been poisoning Emma's opinion of me, creating a narrative where I was the obstacle to their happiness and success. And Theodore was helping her do it, probably planning to step into the role of Emma's new stepfather once the divorce was finalized and Nina's financial situation was settled. I forwarded the email to my personal account and started making phone calls. First to a divorce attorney that Mitch had recommended, then to my financial advisor, then to Angela to thank her for the intelligence and ask if she could keep monitoring the situation. "Why are you helping me?" I asked Angela during our brief phone conversation. Because Nina tried to get me fired last year, she said. She complained to your boss that I was unprofessional and difficult to work with because I questioned some of her suggestions for the Morrison Bridge project. She doesn't like women who don't defer to her authority. Another piece of the puzzle. Nina hadn't just been planning to leave me. She'd been actively working to undermine my professional relationships and isolate me from potential allies. Also, Angela continued, Theodore hit on me at the Christmas party. When I turned him down, he made some comments about my attitude problem to people at the magazine. They deserve each other, but you deserve better. The divorce attorney, David Morrison, was a no-nonsense former prosecutor who specialized in high-conflict cases. He reviewed the evidence I'd gathered and nodded approvingly. This is good work, he said. Documented infidelity, evidence of financial planning to exclude you from marital decisions, and proof that she's been manipulating your relationship with your daughter. In this state, we can use all of this to argue for a favorable asset division and custody arrangement. I don't want to hurt Emma, I said. She's been influenced by her mother, but she's still just 16. Understood. But you need to protect your parental rights, especially if your wife has been systematically undermining your relationship with your daughter. Family court judges don't like parental alienation. Morrison outlined a strategy that was both aggressive and legally sound. Document everything, avoid confrontation until we were ready to file, and prepare for Nina to escalate her behavior once she realized I was no longer the passive husband she'd been counting on. She's going to be surprised, Morrison said. From what you've told me, she's expecting you to either remain oblivious or react emotionally. She's not prepared for a methodical response. That evening, I implemented the first phase of my counter-strategy. Instead of my usual routine of working in the garage or watching television, I joined Nina and Emma in the living room and started asking questions about their day, their plans, their opinions on various topics. This is nice, Nina said, clearly surprised by my sudden interest in family conversation. We should do this more often. I agree, I said. I feel like I've been too focused on work lately. I want to be more involved in what's important to you both. Emma warmed up quickly, telling me about her classes, her friends, her plans for the summer. Nina was more cautious, but she seemed pleased by my apparent effort to be a more engaged husband and father. I've been thinking about what you said at dinner, I told Nina. About maintaining standards and presenting ourselves well. Maybe I have been too practical, too focused on the basics instead of the bigger picture. I'm glad you're open to that, Nina said. There's nothing wrong with wanting more out of life. Exactly. And I want to support your career ambitions too. Tell me more about this summer issue you're working on. Nina's face lit up as she described the magazine's upcoming projects, the creative challenges, the collaboration with the art direction team. She mentioned Theodore several times, always in professional terms, but I could see the subtle changes in her expression when she said his name. He sounds very talented, I said. Maybe we should have him over for dinner sometime. I'd like to meet the people you work with. Nina's composure slipped for just a moment. Oh, that's not necessary. Work relationships are different from social relationships. Of course. I just thought it might be nice to put faces to the names I hear about. Emma looked back and forth between us, sensing undercurrents she couldn't quite identify. Are you guys okay? You're being weird. We're fine, honey, Nina said quickly. Your father's just trying to be more supportive of my career. Which I should have been doing all along, I added. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership, and I haven't been holding up my end. That night, Nina was more affectionate than she'd been in months. She curled up against me in bed, her head on my chest, and talked about her hopes for the magazine, for Emma's future, for our life together. I know I've been difficult lately, she said. Work stress, you know? But I do love you, Grant. I want us to work. I stroked her hair and made appropriate responses while thinking about the email she'd sent Theodore that morning, planning their next hotel rendezvous, and discussing strategy for managing my suspicions. She was a better liar than I'd given her credit for, but she wasn't the only one who could play multiple games at once. I love you too, I said, and I want us to work too, whatever it takes. She fell asleep in my arms, and I lay awake planning the next phase of my campaign. Nina thought she was managing me, controlling the narrative, setting up the pieces for her eventual exit strategy. She had no idea that I was building a counter-strategy that would leave her and Theodore scrambling to salvage their reputations and their careers. The foundation of her plan was about to develop some serious structural problems. The confrontation I'd been planning came together faster than expected. Angela forwarded me an email thread between Nina and Theodore discussing their next business trip, a long weekend at a resort in Vermont, supposedly for a lifestyle magazine conference that I quickly discovered didn't exist. "The Stowe Mountain Lodge," Theodore had written. "I've booked us the couple's suite. We can work on the summer layouts during the day and enjoy the spa services in the evening." Nina's response was enthusiastic. "Perfect. I'll tell Grant it's a networking opportunity with other regional publications. He won't question it. He never does." They were getting sloppy, overconfident in my supposed obliviousness. The email trail included detailed plans for their romantic getaway, complete with dinner reservations and couples massage appointments. Nothing about actual magazine business. I printed everything and added it to the growing file that Morrison was preparing for the divorce proceedings. But first, I had a different kind of confrontation in mind. Friday evening, I told Nina I'd decided to surprise her at the magazine's office with dinner from her favorite restaurant. "That's so sweet," she said. "But I'm working late tonight. Really late. Probably until 10 or 11. "Perfect. I'll bring dinner around 8. You have to eat something." She looked uncomfortable, but couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious. "Okay, but just leave it at the front desk. I'll be in meetings most of the evening." "I'd like to see your office. You've been working so hard lately, and I want to understand your world better." Nina's smile became strained. "It's really not that interesting. Just cubicles and conference rooms. I'm sure it's more impressive than you're letting on. I'll see you around 8. I arrived at the magazine's building at 7:45 with takeout from Chez Laurent, the same restaurant where Theodore had taken Nina for their romantic dinner. The security guard called upstairs to announce me, and I could hear the panic in Nina's voice even through the phone's tiny speaker. "Send him up," she said after a long pause. The elevator ride to the 15th floor gave me time to prepare my performance. I was the devoted husband bringing dinner to his hard-working wife, nothing more. Nina was waiting by the elevator when the doors opened, looking professionally composed but with tension around her eyes. "Grant, this is such a surprise," she said, accepting the bag of food with a forced smile. "I thought you might be hungry. Where's your office?" "It's just down here," she said, leading me through an open workspace filled with empty cubicles and dark conference rooms. "Everyone else has gone home." "Everyone except you and Theodore," I said casually. Nina's step faltered slightly. "Theo's here too. We're working on the summer layouts." "Great. I'd love to meet him. He's in his office, very focused. I don't want to interrupt his creative process." We reached Nina's office, a glass-walled space with a view of the city and enough personal touches to make it clear this was her domain. Photos of Emma, awards from the magazine industry, expensive furniture that reflected her taste for the finer things. "This is impressive," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Much nicer than my office." "Thank you." Nina unpacked the food nervously. "You really didn't have to do this." "I wanted to. We've been disconnected lately, and I thought maybe if I understood your work environment better, we could find more common ground." "That's very thoughtful. So where is Theodore's office?" "Down the hall." "Why?" "I'd like to introduce myself. You've mentioned him so often, I feel like I know him already." Nina's composure cracked slightly. "He's really busy tonight. Maybe another time. I insist, it'll just take a minute." Before Nina could stop me, I stood up and walked out of her office. The magazine's floor plan was open enough that I could see most of the workspace. and it didn't take long to spot the light coming from a corner office with Theodore's nameplate on the door. I knocked and entered without waiting for permission. Theodore was sitting behind his desk, but he wasn't working on any layouts. His shirt was unbuttoned, his hair was disheveled, and he had the look of a man who'd been expecting someone else entirely. "You must be Theodore," I said, extending my hand with a friendly smile. "I'm Grant Ellery, Nina's husband." Theodore scrambled to button his shirt and compose himself. "Mr. Ellery, what a surprise. Nina didn't mention you were coming by. I wanted to surprise her with dinner, and I wanted to meet the colleague she's been working so closely with. We've been very busy with the summer issue," Theodore said, his voice slightly higher than normal. "So I understand. Nina tells me you two have been putting in a lot of late nights together." "Yes. Well, creative collaboration requires significant time investment." I looked around Theodore's office, noting the expensive artwork, the designer furniture, the general air of someone who valued appearance over substance. There was a bottle of wine on his desk, 2 glasses, and a vase of fresh flowers that definitely weren't standard office decor. "Working dinner?" I asked, nodding toward the wine. "Sometimes a little alcohol helps the creative process," Theodore said weakly. "I'm sure it does. Nina mentioned you two are planning a business trip to Vermont next week." Theodore's face went pale. "A conference, very important for the magazine's regional connections." "Of course. What's the conference called? Maybe I could look into it, see if there are any engineering presentations that might interest me." It's very specialized, lifestyle publication industry, nothing that would apply to your field." Nina appeared in the doorway, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Grant, we should let Theo get back to work," she said. "Absolutely. I just wanted to put a face to the name." I shook Theodore's hand again, gripping it firmly enough to make him wince. "It's been very enlightening." The elevator ride down was silent. Nina stared at the floor numbers while I watched her reflection in the polished steel doors. "He seems nice," I said as we reached the parking garage. "He's very professional," Nina replied. "I could see that. Very dedicated to his work." "Grant, what are you doing?" "I'm trying to be more involved in your life, like you wanted. Is there a problem with that?" Nina studied my face, looking for signs of accusation or anger, but I kept my expression neutral and supportive. "No problem," she said finally. "I just wasn't expecting you to show up at the office. Maybe I should do it more often. It's good to see where you spend your days." That weekend, I implemented the next phase of my plan. Instead of my usual home improvement projects, I suggested we do something as a family. Nina proposed shopping at the upscale mall across town, the kind of place where she could see and be seen by the right people. I agreed enthusiastically, even suggesting we make a day of it with lunch and maybe a movie. At the mall, I played the role of the attentive husband, asking Nina's opinion on clothes, complimenting her taste, carrying her shopping bags without complaint. Emma was delighted by this new version of her father, the one who seemed interested in fashion and social appearances. "Dad, you should totally get this shirt," Emma said, holding up something that cost more than I usually spent on clothes in 6 months. "If you think it looks good, I trust your judgment," I said, taking it to the counter. Nina watched this performance with growing confusion. The husband, who'd been content with his old clothes and practical purchases, was suddenly willing to spend money on image and status symbols. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked, as I bought a watch that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. "I feel great. I've been thinking about what you said, about maintaining standards and presenting ourselves well. Maybe it's time I started paying more attention to those things. This is quite a change." People can change, can't they? Especially when they're motivated by love. At lunch, I steered the conversation toward Nina's work, asking detailed questions about her projects, her colleagues, and her professional goals. "I've been thinking about your career trajectory," I said. You're clearly very talented, and you work so well with people like Theodore. Have you considered what your next step might be? Nina's fork paused halfway to her mouth. My next step? Professionally. You've been lifestyle editor for 3 years now. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I haven't really thought that far ahead. Maybe you should. Ambitious people need long-term plans. Emma jumped into the conversation with her own career aspirations, talking about college and majors and the kind of life she wanted to build. I encouraged her dreams while subtly steering the discussion toward the importance of honesty, integrity, and treating people with respect. The most successful people I know are the ones who build their careers on solid foundations, I said. Trust, competence, and ethical behavior. Everything else is just window dressing. Nina was quiet for the rest of lunch, and I could see her trying to figure out what game I was playing. The problem was, from her perspective, I wasn't playing a game at all. I was just being the husband she claimed to want, supportive, interested, willing to invest in the lifestyle she valued. She couldn't object to any of it without revealing her own hidden agenda. That evening, she tried a different approach. Grant, I appreciate the effort you're making, but you don't have to change who you are for me, she said as we got ready for bed. I'm not changing who I am. I'm just expanding my perspective. You've helped me see that there's more to life than just work and practical concerns. But I fell in love with the practical man, the one who could fix anything and solve any problem. I'm still that man. I'm just adding some new skills to my toolkit. Nina looked like she wanted to say more, but she couldn't find the words. How do you tell your husband to stop being everything you've claimed to want? As she fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned the final phase of my campaign. Nina and Theodore thought they were playing a sophisticated game of deception and manipulation. They had no idea they were about to discover what happened when you tried to outmaneuver someone who understood structural engineering. Every building had a load-bearing capacity. Push beyond that limit, and the whole thing came down. I was about to find out what Nina and Theodore's breaking point looked like. The Vermont trip was scheduled for Thursday through Sunday. Nina had been preparing for weeks, buying new clothes and talking enthusiastically about the networking opportunities and professional development sessions she'd be attending. I waited until Wednesday night to spring my surprise. I've been thinking about your conference, I said over dinner, and I realized I've never been to Vermont in the fall. The foliage must be beautiful this time of year. Nina's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. It's a work trip, Grant. Very intensive. Lots of meetings and presentations. I know, but I thought I could drive up Saturday morning. Maybe we could have dinner together Saturday night after your sessions are finished, make a mini vacation out of it. That's not really possible. The conference runs late into the evening, and Sunday morning there's a breakfast networking session that's supposed to be very important. What's the name of the conference again? Maybe I could look at the schedule online, see when you might have some free time. Nina's composure cracked visibly. It's very specialized, industry-specific. You wouldn't find it interesting. Try me. I'm interested in everything that's important to you. Emma looked up from her phone, sensing the tension that had suddenly filled the room. What's wrong with Dad wanting to visit you? She asked Nina. It sounds romantic. It is romantic, I agreed. Your mother works so hard she deserves to have someone who appreciates her dedication. Nina excused herself to take a phone call, and I could hear her voice from the kitchen, low and urgent. When she came back, she looked like someone who'd just received very bad news. The conference organizers are very strict about non-industry attendees, she said. Security concerns, proprietary information being discussed. Spouses aren't allowed. That seems unusual, but I understand. Professional confidentiality is important. Thursday morning, I helped Nina load her car with luggage that seemed excessive for a business conference. She kissed me goodbye at the front door, her lips barely touching my cheek. I'll miss you, she said, the words sounding rehearsed. I'll miss you too. Have a productive conference. I watched her drive away, then went inside, and made a phone call to Morrison. "She's gone," I said. "It's time." "Are you sure you want to do this?" Morrison asked. "Once we file, there's no going back." "I'm sure." "All right, I'll have the papers ready by Monday. But Grant, are you prepared for what comes next? She's going to fight dirty once she realizes what's happening." "Let her fight. I've got better ammunition." Friday evening, I implemented the next phase of my plan. Instead of staying home, I drove to the Riverside Hotel where Nina and Theodore were supposed to be having their romantic getaway. I'd called ahead and confirmed they were registered under Theodore's name in the couple's suite, just like his email had promised. I didn't confront them. Instead, I sat in the hotel bar and waited. At 8:30, they came down for dinner, holding hands and looking like any other couple on a romantic weekend. Nina was wearing the red dress I'd found in her closet, the one with the tags still on. Theodore was in an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. They didn't see me in the corner booth, too wrapped up in each other to notice their surroundings. I watched them share appetizers, laugh at each other's jokes, and plan what was probably going to be their last carefree evening together. When they left the restaurant, I followed at a distance. They walked through the hotel's garden, Theodore's arm around Nina's waist, stopping to kiss under the decorative lighting, like something out of a romantic movie. I took photos with my phone, not because I needed more evidence, but because I wanted them to remember this moment, the last time they'd felt safe and confident in their deception. Saturday morning, I drove to Mitch's gym and found him working with a teenage boxer, teaching the kid how to throw combinations without telegraphing his intentions. "The key is misdirection," Mitch was saying. "Make your opponent think you're going one way, then hit them from the angle they're not expecting." "Good advice," I said when the session was over. "How's your situation progressing?" Mitch asked. "They're at the hotel right now, probably having brunch and planning their future together. By Monday, their whole world is going to change. You sure you want to go nuclear? There might be ways to handle this that don't involve total destruction. They made their choice when they decided I was too stupid to figure it out. Now they get to live with the consequences." Mitch nodded approvingly. "Sometimes the only way to deal with a structural problem is controlled demolition. Just make sure you're clear of the blast radius." Sunday evening, Nina came home glowing with what she claimed was professional satisfaction. "How was the conference?" I asked, helping her carry her luggage upstairs. "Very productive. Lots of new ideas, great networking opportunities. I feel like I learned so much about the industry." "That's wonderful. Did you get a chance to work closely with any of the other attendees?" "Oh, you know how these things are. Lots of group sessions, panel discussions, very collaborative environment." "I'm sure it was." That night, Nina was more affectionate than she'd been in months, as if her weekend with Theodore had recharged her ability to play the role of loving wife. She curled up against me in bed and talked about her career goals, her hopes for the magazine, and her appreciation for my support. "I know I haven't been the easiest person to live with lately," she said, "but I want you to know that I value what we have. Our partnership, our family, our life together." "I value it too," I said, stroking her hair. "More than you know." She fell asleep in my arms, and I lay awake thinking about the divorce papers that Morrison would be filing in the morning. By this time tomorrow, Nina's carefully constructed world would be crashing down around her. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Morrison's office to review the final paperwork. The divorce petition was comprehensive, documenting Nina's adultery, her financial deception, and her attempts to alienate Emma's affections. We were asking for primary custody, a favorable asset division, and spousal support that would leave Nina with significantly less than she'd been counting on. "She's going to be served at her office this afternoon," Morrison said. "I recommend you not be home when she gets the news. Angry people do unpredictable things." "I'll be at Mitch's gym. She knows where to find me if she wants to talk." "One more thing," Morrison said. "We've prepared a separate file for Theodore Marten. If he's been using company resources for personal relationships, his employer might be very interested in that information. Send it to Nina's boss first. Let them decide how to handle their internal personnel issues. At 3:47 p.m., my phone rang. Nina's name appeared on the screen, but when I answered, the voice was pure fury. "You bastard!" she screamed. "How could you do this to me?" "Do what, Nina? File for divorce? I thought that's what you wanted." "Not like this. Not with these accusations, these lies." "They're not lies. I have documentation for everything in that petition." The line went quiet for a long moment, and when Nina spoke again, her voice was cold and calculating. "You have no idea what you've started," she said. "I'll destroy you in court. I'll take everything, including Emma." "Good luck with that," I said, and hung up. 20 minutes later, Theodore called. "Grant, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "No misunderstanding. You've been sleeping with my wife and using company resources to do it. That's pretty straightforward. We need to talk about this rationally, man to man. We are talking. This is the conversation. I mean, in person. There are things you don't understand about the situation." "Like what?" "That you've done this before with other married colleagues, that you're using Nina to advance your career, that you're planning to dump her once you get what you want." Silence on the other end of the line. "I did my research, Theodore. You're not as clever as you think you are." "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want you to stay away from my family. I want you to find a new job, preferably in a different city. And I want you to remember that I'm a civil engineer who knows how to find structural weaknesses and exploit them." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining the situation. Your career at the magazine is over. Your relationship with Nina is over. Your reputation in this town is about to become very complicated. Those are just facts." I hung up and turned off my phone. Whatever happened next, Nina and Theodore would have to figure it out without my participation. The foundation of their plan had just collapsed, and they were about to discover what it felt like to be buried in the rubble. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning of their education in structural engineering. Sometimes the most important lesson is that every building, no matter how solid it looks, can be brought down if you know where to apply the right pressure. And I was very good at finding pressure points.